Everybody. Daf Yomi is sponsored by Gray in memory of her brother Bobby, her mother Beverly, her grandmother Grace, and by Jill Sachs in memory of her father Chaim Feidelberg and Baruch Shimon, and by David and Naomi Balto on the occasion of the 100th yahrzeit of Naomi's grandmother Miriam Seligman. So we had said we're going to start on the bottom of 23b. The Gemara had said, in the situation where there were two brothers, there were two sisters. One was married to one man, and the other was married to another man, and each one had two brothers, and they don't know who betrothed whom. That the first set does chalitza; they both do chalitza on both of the sisters, and the other one does the other set. The first one could do chalitza, and the second one could do yibum if he wants it. So the Gemara says this is actually the same principles that we've been discussing up until now. That you can't the basic principles. You're not allowed to marry a woman if she's false to yibum with somebody. It's called the Yevamos. It was shook. She's not allowed to do that. And also that there's a concept of achos sekuka that even if you just have a connection, a yibum type connection waiting, you're not allowed to marry her sister. So these are basic principles. So why do we need to teach it again? Gemara explains hasu amalei hainu hach. Isn't it the same thing? Gemara explains no. Mao detema. You might have thought. Wigs, or you should make the decree because Dilma miyabe and below chalitza. Maybe this person will do yibum without the chalitza. So therefore, for this reason, kamash mon, we don't have to make this decree, and therefore we allow the last person to do yibum. Where I asked the question, why is this different from a Mishnah we're going to get to on 27b, where it says arba achan, if you have four brothers, shnayim and nisu and shtei achayos, two of them are married to two sisters. And then those two brothers, Hanasu and Achayos, the ones who are married to the sisters, there we say Ariel Chotos Yevamos. There we say they require Chalitza, not Yibum. And there Rashi tells us the problem is that there, if they do get married, we make them leave the relationship. We don't let them stay. So why here do we say that if they did Yibum, we allow them to stay? If the final two brothers did Yibum, we allow them to stay. So whereas there's a fundamentally different case. The two cases are a big distinction. There was a connection between the two sisters. If you say there's zika, and so therefore it's like you're married to your wife's do you have a zika, and then you marry the other one. So it's like you're married to a person who has and you have a zika with her sister. So it's like you're married to two sisters. Or also the alternative theory in the Gemara there is that you might come to miss out on an opportunity to do yibum or chalitza. But here, here's a totally different scenario. Each one can claim that I'm actually marrying the one who fell to me in Yibam. So therefore, we now go to the last case in the Mishnah, which says if the two brothers in the last case both did Yibam, then we don't make them divorced. Even though both of them are Kohanim, and they are under these circumstances, as Rashi reminds us, for sure, one of these two sisters had for sure at least a chalutza from one of them. So therefore, what's the reason why we don't make them leave? So the Gemara says, even though chalitza is like a divorce, it's like a divorce in that it separates the marriage, but it's not actually a divorce. So a Kohen is biblically prohibited to marry a divorcee, but a chalutza is only rabbinically prohibited. So the Gemara says, chalutza d'Rabbanan, the chalutza is rabbinically prohibited. The Safek chalitza, we don't know which one of these two women is the one who's actually got the chalitza, and so therefore the rabbis lo gazru b'Rabbanan. Rabbis didn't make a decree. So the Gemara asks the question: is the fact that a woman who was divorced via chalitza, is that really just rabbinically prohibited to a Kohen? Isn't it a biblical prohibition? Tanya grusha enliala grusha chalutza minayin. How we know that a Kohen can't marry a chalutza? It's based upon a verse. Tama Omer v'isha. Because it's based upon the fact that the verse states Isha zonav lo yikachu v'isha grusha. That comes, the word v'isha comes to include a chalutza. Where it says no, midrabanu, it's rabbinic v'kras machta ba'alma, and the verse is just support. Okay, now we go on to a new topic. The Mishnah talks about who does yibum. Again, yibum is the lever of marriage, and in the case where there's multiple brothers, the Talmud says as follows. The Mishnah says mitzvah begadol yabim. The mitzvah is on the oldest brother is the one for whom the mitzvah is to do the yibum. And the mitzvah is on the oldest brother to do yibum. So the kadam akatan zacha. But if the younger brother jumped ahead of the older brother and quickly married the widow, he merits, meaning to say it's valid. My son, our son Shia, asked the question to me last night after we did the daf together. He said, "We know that the Gemara elsewhere tells us that if you steal the mitzvah from somebody else, you have to pay 10 gold coins because you stole a mitzvah from them. Let's say there's a mitzvah called kisoy adam, pouring earth on the blood. You jump ahead and you stole the mitzvah for somebody else, you have to pay him 10 gold coins. You stole his mitzvah. So here, does the younger brother have to pay the older brother 10 gold coins for stealing his mitzvah? Because they both, it's not that it's the older brother's mitzvah, he has more of a right to it. So that was actually a question that's discussed amongst all the authorities. Is this considered stealing the mitzvah since the older brother has a greater right to it, but the younger brother still has a right to it? Anyway, Tana Rabban, the rabbis taught as follows. It says in the verse says, Vaya b'chor asher teled yakum al shem achiv. The firstborn who was born from this union of the brother with the widow, he will uphold the name of his brother. So what does that mean? Vaya b'chor. So the Gemara tells us this teaches us mikan shemitzvah begadol yabim. This teaches us that the mitzvah is on the oldest child to do the yibum. Asher teled prat le'ailonis. That the mitzvah of yibum is with a woman who's able to give birth. It excludes this ailonis, who is this woman who she's not capable to give birth. Yakum al shem achiv. What does it mean that he will uphold the name of his brother? This means that his brother that he gets to inherit his brother. So Gemara says, wait, is that what it means that the one who marries his brother's widow gets to inherit his brother? Doesn't mean he gets to inherit him. Maybe it means that when he gives birth to a child with the widow, that means that maybe all that means is you need to call him by your brother's name. Maybe it's a biblical obligation to call somebody by the name of his deceased uncle here. Meaning to say, if his name would be Yosef, Koronos or Yosef, Yochanan, Koronos or Yochanan. If his uncle's name was Yosef, call him Yosef or Yochanan, whatever his name was. Gemara says, no, Nemar kan yakum al shem achiv. No, we're not going to say that. We're not going to take the verse literally, because it states the words here, yakum al shem achiv, he shall uphold the name of his brother. But earlier actually in Genesis, it says, V'nemar la'alon, about Yosef's sons, al shem achehem yikaru b'nachal asam, that Joseph's sons who are born in Egypt after Menashe Ephraim, they will be called after their brothers for an inheritance. Ma shem amor la'alon, just like by Joseph, the word shem refers to a nachala, refers to inheritance. Av shem amor kan, so too the name that's mentioned here refers to a nachala, refers to inheritance. So here, it doesn't mean you have to name your child after his uncle, your brother. It means that there's an inheritance there. And his name will not be Israel, so that his name not be wiped out. This teaches us This teaches us that if there is a person who's a saris, i.e., is a man not capable of having children, then you don't have to do yibum with his widow. So Amar Rava, Rava teaches us a fundamental principle, a very important principle throughout the Shas. So what is this principle? It says, even though throughout the whole Torah, the concept is a verse never leaves its literal meaning to say you always have to look at what we call the pshat. Even though the whole Torah, you have to look at the pshat. Here comes a gzera shava, meaning we compare this verse by Yibum to the verse by Genesis, and it gets rid of the pshat. We don't look at the pshat here at all. We don't look at the literal explanation. Because the lav gezerah shava were not for this gezerah shava to the sons of Joseph. Hava amin, I would have said shem mamish. And when it says it says yakum al shem achiv, that he should uphold the name of his brother. I would say it means that he actually has to name the child after his deceased brother. So the Gemara says, the Gemara says, wait 1 second. Who is the Torah warning to name? According to your approach, who would the Torah have been warning to name the child after their brother? You're saying that the brother, you're commanding him to name his child by his brother's name. Then Yakum al Shem Achiv. Then it should have said, name it after your brother. Here it says, in the verse actually says after his brother. Ila Beidina, if it's a commandment to the court, Yakum al Shem Yakum al Shem Achi Aviv, by the way. It should say by the name of his father's, the brother of the father, it should say. So the Gemara says, well, no. And this is what the Torah is saying to the court, maybe. Yavam, say to this Yavam, i.e., to the brother, Yakum al Shem Achiv, that he should uphold the name of his brother. But El Asik Zer Shava Afik Delegamri. So the comparison to Joseph takes out this word and says we don't learn from here. There's no biblical obligation in this circumstance to name a child after his deceased brother. The spiritual value to doing so, to naming somebody after somebody else, but there's no biblical obligation. The Gemara says, well, Hash the Amres Kra Begadol Ksiv. So the Gemara says, well, since you say that the verse, but now that you said that the verse is referring to the oldest child, but maybe Ema Bechor Liyabim Pashat Lo Liyabim. Maybe it means that if the brother is actually a Bechor, there's two ways that you can have a son who's the oldest son, but he's not the firstborn, because there could be a daughter who's older than him. So maybe it means that only if the oldest son is also the Bechor, that's where he does Yibum. But a Pashat, but a regular person, a regular brother, doesn't do Yibum. Gemara says, no, Imkain Eishes Achiv Shaloya Ba'olamo Dimiyad Rachman Alamoi. It can't be, because we know that the Torah also limits, we have seen this earlier, the Torah limits from Yibum a brother who was not alive at the same time as a deceased brother. So we wouldn't have to limit that. If Yibum would never be by anybody who's not the oldest, who's not the firstborn, you would never have to limit this case of Eishes Achiv Shaloya Ba'olamo. So therefore, it proves that that from the fact that Torah limits that circumstance, it proves that the Torah says that Yibum could be done by any of the brothers, not just the firstborn. So Parach Rav Achav Ve'emel Miuta Buchra De'ima. Maybe it's coming to exclude a firstborn from the mother, meaning the mother's firstborn son, but not the father's. So the Gemara says, meaning to say that you have a paternal brother, but there's one firstborn from the father, but there's another one. He had another wife, and that's the firstborn from the mother. Maybe that's saying that person doesn't do Yibum. That's what the Gemara says. No, Ahulo Matzis Amris, that we would never have said. The Yibum Benachot Tarachmana. The whole concept of Yibum is inheritance, and inheritance goes through the father's side, not the mother's side. Maybe you only do the mitzvah of Yibum when there is a firstborn. When there's no firstborn, Kileika Bechor Lo Tiskai Mitzvah Yibum. Maybe if there's no firstborn, there's no mitzvah of Yibum at all. Gemara says, no, we don't say that. Why would we not say that idea? Amarkra Umeis Echad Mehem. Because the verse says, if one of them dies, Milo Askina, we must obviously be talking about a case, the Mis Bechor, where the firstborn died, and the Torah tells us that the younger brother should do Yibum. So there's no firstborn at all, and the Torah tells us we have to do Yibum. Where it says, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's where the younger brother died, and the Torah tells us that the Bechor should do the firstborn there. No, Gemara says it can't be. That's the case, because the Torah tells us about this brother is born after the fact that he doesn't do Yibum, which means that generally speaking, the younger brother does do Yibum. Gemara says, well, another possibility, maybe when there's no firstborn, kodam katan sacha, then the younger brother can jump ahead and do Yibum. If even though he's not the oldest, if there's a firstborn, maybe if there's a firstborn and the younger child jumped ahead, it's not effective. Mara says no. The verse says when two brothers dwell together, huksha yeshivas acham zelazeh. We compare the two brothers, meaning to say that they both have the opportunity to do Yibum. Maybe when there's a firstborn, you have to make sure that the oldest one does it. Maybe when there's no firstborn, we don't care who does it first. It doesn't have to be the oldest one. We don't try to get the oldest one to do it first. Gemara says no, but that's not the case. We know that we should always try to get the older brother to do it first. At first, you try to get the oldest one to do it. If he doesn't want to do it, then you go to the next one. Then if the youngest one doesn't want to do it, you go back to the oldest one and make him do it. So maybe that's all it means. That when there is a firstborn, you get the oldest. When there's no firstborn, you get the you don't care to do it the oldest. Gemara says, no, we're not going to say that. Kibachor. No, it's like the first one. Ma bachor b'koraso garmelo. Just like the firstborn, his status as being the firstborn gives him this right. Ma bachor b'koraso garmelo, that he comes before all the other brothers. Excuse me. So too, Avgado Gedolaso Garmelo. The oldest brother comes before the younger brothers. Maybe when the firstborn does the Yibum, then he gets to inherit his deceased brother. But if the non-firstborn does the Yibum, then he doesn't get to inherit. The Gemara says, no. Amarkra Yakum. It's at verse 8, Yakum al Shem Achiv, Varekam. Anybody who takes the place of his brother gets to inherit it. Gemara says, well, if that's the case, so why does the Torah specifically say when the Bechor in the verse, what does it specifically say? Bechor asher teleid. It could have just said the Gadol. Why does it say firstborn? The Gemara says L'griusa. It's actually coming to diminish him, to diminish the brother who does Yibum. Meaning to say, just like a firstborn, when he inherits, he doesn't inherit. He gets, the firstborn gets a double portion. The Bechor gets a double portion, but that's only in what the estate has at that time. That's what's called muchsak. But if things are eventually going to fall to the estate, let's say the firstborn's father died, but his grandfather's still alive. Eventually, the grandfather is going to die, and that's going to fall down through the father's property and be inherited by his sons. There, the firstborn doesn't get a double portion of it. He only gets kibbutz muchzak, but not baroi, not what's eventually going to come. Half high. So too in this circumstance, the one who does yibum with his brother's widow, he inherits his brother, but ain't no tell baroi kibbutz muchzak. He only gets what the brother has at that point. Now, what his brother would inherit later on, that's actually divided equally amongst him and all his siblings. Now the Mishnah takes us in a totally different direction. Just when you thought you were getting the hang of it, the Mishnah takes us in a totally different direction. Anitan, somebody who has a rumor about him that they're suspected of being in a sexual relationship. So Anitan al Shivcha, somebody who's suspected of being in a relationship with a slave woman, and then she's freed, or with an idolatrous woman, and then she converts. Well, guess what? He's not allowed to marry her, because if he marries her, it's going to substantiate the claims or give more credence to the claims that he was in a sinful relationship. But if he didn't marry her, we don't force them to get divorced. However, if somebody was if there's a rumor that he was in a relationship with a married woman, and then as a result of this, they forced her to get divorced, because a woman who's being adulterous, we will force her to get divorced. So therefore, under those circumstances, afal pisha kanas yotzi, and then the man who she was rumored to be in a relationship with, marries her, we force them to get divorced. Because basically, Rashi tells us, biblically speaking, she's prohibited to be with the man whom she had a adulterous relationship. She's prohibited to the both to her husband and to the person she was adulterous with. So the Gemara says, well, from the fact that we say in the first case of the Mishnah that if she was idolatrous and there was rumored to be with him, and then she converts, we're not going to let her marry him, but that applies a gioros miahavia, but she is a valid conversion. There are many, but this contradicts what we've already been taught, because then we say echad isha niskar l'shem isha v'echad isha niskar l'shem ish. Whether a man converts to be with a woman or a woman converts because she wants to be married to the man, Or somebody converts to be at the table of kings or the servant of Solomon, Einan Gerim. There, it's not a valid conversion according to Rabbi Nechemiah. Rabbi Nechemiah Omer Gerei Arayos. These are whether people converted because they thought the lions were not going to attack the Jews, so they'd be protected. They were inspired by the fact that the lions did not attack the Jews. This was a Gemara in Kedushin, Bava Kama, and Sanhedrin. Or Echagera Chalomos, somebody converted because somebody told them, I have a dream and you need to convert. Echagera Mordechai or Esther. People convert in time of Mordechai and Esther when the Jews, it says in Esther chapter 8, that they were all afraid of Mordechai, so they converted. It says, Rabbi Nechemiah said, Einan Gerim, they're not going to be converts. Until they convert nowadays. What do you mean Bismanazeh? Nowadays, they were many years ago. Bismanazeh, until they convert, like nowadays, meaning to say that in a time where the Jewish people are that we're in a state of, we're not forcing them. So we don't, according to Rabbi Nechemiah, it's not a valid conversion if you convert because the Jewish people they're doing so well and they're making so much money and they're so powerful, so therefore I want to convert. No, we don't accept that conversion. That's what Rabbi Nechemiah says. Mar says, yeah, but we don't rule like Rabbi Nechemiah. No, we don't agree with that. The law is that it is a valid conversion, and so therefore it's a valid conversion, even if they did it because they wanted to just be part of Jewish power or ulterior motives, like they want to be connected to this relationship. It's still a valid conversion. Well, the Gemara says, so then why don't we allow him to marry or even initially, even ideally? The Gemara says, no. The Mishum de Ravasi, the Ravasi, Hasur Mimcha Ikshos Peh, remove from yourself Ikshos Peh Lazus Vasayim, meaning to say that don't give credence to these rumors that you were with this idolatrous woman before she was converted, and so therefore, for that reason, it's better not to get married. The rabbis taught we're not going to accept converts in the time of the Messiah. Presumably, I'll come back to this in a moment. Will be made David, will be Shlomo. So also, you don't accept converts, and they didn't accept converts in the time of David or in the time of Solomon. What's the verse based upon? Amar Belazar Mikra, Hein Gor. This is based upon Isaiah 54. Hein Gor Yagor Efes Meusim Migari Tach Alayach Hipol. Meaning to say, only if you lived with me when I was in a state of Efes. Meaning to say, whoever lived with you in your state of poverty, that's the person you're going to take now. If you're with me in my dark times, then you can be with me in my powerful times, the time of Mashiach. I think obviously in the Talmud Yotze Midei Pshuto, we can't take it out of its initial reading, but there's another possible explanation. What's the reason why we're not going to accept the converts in the time of the Mashiach? Because now we're living in a world where the world is so messed up. The world is so sad. You have wars, people killing each other, hurting each other. It's terrible. But in the time of the Mashiach, so now I can understand why nowadays somebody would want to become Jewish, because now they want to go close to the Torah, because the Torah represents an oasis, an island in the midst of tremendous turmoil. But in the time of the Mashiach, the whole world is going to be beautiful. So you're not going to need to convert to Judaism. Everybody's going to be able to do it in their own way. And so therefore we won't have to accept converts then, because the whole world will be lifted up. So then the Mishnah said that if somebody was suspected of being with an adulterous woman, that even if then we force her to get divorced, but we do not allow her to then marry this man. And if she did marry him, we force them to get divorced. So Amar Rav says this idea, this whole concept that we force her to get divorced, and then if she married the person who there was a suspicion of with him, we force that relationship to end too. So it says Rav Ube'edim. That's where there were witnesses to her adultery. It wasn't just a rumor. Amar Rav Sheshes says, no. Amina kinayim v'shachav Rav Amar Lahishmaita. He says, Rav must have been sleeping or dozing when he said this teaching. There were no witnesses, according to Rav Sheshes. Rav was wrong. So the Gemara says, Tanya, what does the Brisa say? Let's say there's a rumor that this married woman was adulterous, but it's you al yado. And then what happened was they forced her to leave the relationship. They forced her to read they forced her to leave the relationship. Then she married in between a middle guy, and then that middle guy divorced her. Imkanas, now she goes back to not her husband, but the man she was accused of being adulterous with Imkanas lo yotzi, that if she marries him, he doesn't have to send her away. So what's this case of this price that says Rav Sheshes? What's the scenario here? If the scenario is that there are witnesses, so what do we care that there was a second man in between who stopped the rumor? Why does it even matter? There were witnesses. Of course she has to leave the third guy if she goes with him again. So it must be there were no witnesses. What's the reason? So there are no witnesses, and what's the reason why we force her to leave the second? Why, if she goes with the third guy, she doesn't have to. Well, if she goes back to the guy she was accused of being adulterous with, why she doesn't have to leave him? Because so there was no witnesses the time of the asa achar and the second guy came in between and messed up and stopped the rumor. But if it would be just no witnesses and there would be no guy in between, mafkina, we would have kicked her out from this relationship. So we see from here that Rav is wrong, that even when there's no witnesses, we make her leave the relationship for which there was a rumor that they were adulterous. Gemara says, Rav will respond, Rav says, no, it's the same law. Even if there were no witnesses, and there was nobody, Rav says, even if there was nobody in between, will be the same law. If there are witnesses, we kick her out from the relationship. If no witnesses, we don't. And this is what that Brisa is saying. That even though another person came along and thereby he stopped the rumor because he married her in between, that still she should still not marry the guy who she was accused of having an adulterous relationship with, and that's why, since there are no witnesses, they don't have to leave. But even though the rumor was broken, she still shouldn't marry him. Meisvei, the Gemara challenges Rav. We say, when do we make her leave this relationship? When do we make her leave this relationship when she has no children? When do we say that? What is Bamet Dvarim Amurim? That if the person who has this bad rumor about her, if he marries her, he has to leave. That in our Mishnah, that's when she has no children from the first union. But if she had children with the first husband, we don't make her leave. Why? Because if we're going to make her leave if we're going to make her leave from this person from that is a rumor, then we're going to give credence to the rumors, and then people are going to say, "Oh, her first children from her first husband are all mamzer and they're bastard children." So therefore, we're not going to make her leave under those circumstances. But if there were witnesses that she was adulterous, then I feel then even if there were multiple witnesses, she has to leave. So the Gemara says, so isn't this a question on Rav? Because the whole point is that if there were no witnesses, we make her leave unless she has children. So the Gemara says, Rav Mukilo Masnisin B'yesh Labanim. No, Rav says our Mishnah, which says that you force her to leave, it's because there were children, V'yesh La'edim, and there were witnesses. So the Gemara is going to go into that and challenge that, but we'll stop here. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address them.